In the early 1990s, 4 European airlines started talks on an ambitious project: create one big super airline and become one of the largest of Europe and the world. SAS, KLM, Austrain and Swissair worked together on the project with codename Alcazar. However, the merge was never finalized. Why not? Let's talk aviation. If you enjoyed this video, remember to like and subscribe. This really helps the channel grow and makes it easier for others to find. After the deregulation of the European aviation market and more countries collaborated in the European Union, it became clear that there was no place left in Europe for the many national carriers that operated at the continent. 3 large airlines, British Airways, Air France and Lufthansa, were too big to compete with, and when the oil prices increased due to the Gulf War, smaller airlines looked for ways to cut costs and profit from the economies of scale, the same way the 3 largest airlines did. 4 of them, SAS, the flag carrier of Norway, Sweden and Denmark, KLM, the Dutch flag carrier, Austrian and Swissair, came together in order to form one of the largest airlines of the world. After a year of intense discussions, KLM was the first to pull the plug on the project, citing the difficulty to agree on an American partner. At the time, KLM owned 20% of Northwest Airlines, the US's 4th largest airlines, and it argued that they should choose Northwest as their partner in the States. The other 3, however, wanted to go with Delta, the 2nd largest of the US. This was not surprising in the case of Swissair, as they owned 5% of Delta and Delta had 5% of Swissair shares. SAS, on the other hand, had already agreed that if the merger was successful, it would sell its stake in Continental, yet another US airline. It is somewhat ironic that the merger talks trended on the choice between Delta and Northwest, as in 2008, those two would merge and continue under the Delta brand. While the choice for the partner in the US was the breaking point, there were many other difficulties during the discussions. One of the main reasons to merge was to profit from the economies of scale. This meant, however, that the new super airline would close some of its hubs and get one large corporate office. This turned out to be yet another hot topic. For example, the SAS hub at Copenhagen would close in favor of Schiphol. This led to resistance from labor unions in the affected countries, as they foresaw the loss of jobs. And lastly, many of the airlines were still, at least partially, government-owned, and these saw their flag carrier as a symbol of national pride. Creating one big international carrier would take this away. Now that we had a glimpse at what could have been, where did the 4 airlines end up in the end? First of all, KLM. After the talks on Project Alcazar collapsed, they went on to look for another airline to merge with. Around the turn of the century, they ended talks with Alitalia. These would also turn out to be unsuccessful, and both moved on. And then, after 9/11, the aviation market got a hit, and KLM was in dire need for an influx of cash and a partner to work with. They were, unlike many other European airlines, not yet part of an alliance, and thus had some more freedom to look around. Their US partner, Northwest, was growing closer to Delta, one of the founding members of the Sky Team, just like Air France, one of the 3 large European carriers. In the end, the airlines agreed to merge, while both keeping their identities and brands. SAS chose another route. Instead of going for a full merger, they went on to work with other airlines in partnerships. And in 1997, they were one of the 5 founding airlines of the first alliance, the Star Alliance, together with Lufthansa, Thai Airways, United and Air Canada. Austrian at the time was one of the smallest of the 4 and still government-owned. After the failed merger talks, the airline kept going steady for another 15 years, until around 2008. The Austrian government decided that it was time to privatize the airline. There was more than enough interest from foreign airlines in the company, and both Air France, KLM and Lufthansa became frontrunners to take over the airline. In the end, the Austrian government decided to go with Lufthansa, and Austrian still lives on as a separate brand in the Lufthansa group. The last airline, Swissair, was the least successful. After failed attempts to merge and acquire other airlines, they went bankrupt in 2001 after a chain of unfortunate events. The combination of 9/11, the uprise of Ryanair and EasyJet, and a fatal crash made that the airline cease to exist. Their spiritual successor, Swiss International Airlines, was founded shortly thereafter. A couple of years after its founding, they too were taken over by Lufthansa in 2005. What are your thoughts about Project Alcazar? If the super airline was formed, how do you think it would have impacted global aviation today? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and please consider subscribing to Let's Talk Aviation.